Some prisons don't have locks or chains. They're built from whispered obligations, from the quiet surrender of dreams, from love that demands everything and returns nothing. Catherine Reynolds understood this prison intimately. She had constructed it herself, brick by brick, sacrifice by sacrifice, always believing freedom would come when her debts of motherhood were finally paid. She never expected freedom to arrive in the harsh fluorescent light of an airport terminal, standing alone with her suitcase while the last passengers disappeared into waiting cars. She never imagined liberation beginning with a betrayal so complete it left her stranded, penniless, in a howling Boston blizzard. She couldn't have known that the son who abandoned her had already emptied her accounts, forged her signature, and was planning to erase her final independence. They say the most dangerous moment in a woman's life is when she finally says no after decades of saying yes. When the strings that bind her to duty, to guilt, to expectation begin, one by one, to break. Catherine Reynolds stood in the frigid Boston airport terminal, watching families reunite in tearful embraces while she remained alone, her small suitcase clutched in her trembling hand. The departures board had finally stopped its cruel cycle of delays, and Flight 1843 from Chicago had landed 3 hours late, now, at nearly midnight. With a blizzard raging outside, the last passengers had disappeared into waiting cars, leaving only Kathy and the hollow echo of the terminal announcements. She checked her phone again, 2% battery, no messages, and 5 unanswered calls to her son Brian. The last text she'd sent landed safely. "Are you here?" remained on read but unanswered. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, snow swirled in the harsh glow of the parking lot lights, accumulating in drifts that had already swallowed the curbs. "Last call for passenger Catherine Reynolds," came a voice over the intercom. "Your party is waiting at Information Desk 3. Hope surged through her chest as she hurried across the terminal, her sensible shoes squeaking against the polished floor. But when she arrived, breathless, there was only a tired airport employee who handed her a hastily scrawled note. "Mom, something came up with investors. Take a cab. We'll reimburse. Brian." The employee, a woman about Kathy's age with kind eyes, gave her a sympathetic look. "Would you like me to call you a taxi, ma'am?" Kathy's fingers crushed the note. "Yes, please," she whispered, embarrassment burning her cheeks. She fumbled for her wallet, checking the cash compartment. $23. Not enough for the 40-minute ride from Logan to her apartment in Cambridge, especially in this weather. "I'll need to stop at an ATM first," she told the woman, who nodded and made the call. 15 minutes later, Kathy stood shivering at the passenger pickup area, watching the illuminated taxi sign approach through the curtain of snow. The cold bit through her thin Chicago coat. She hadn't expected to need her heavy Boston winter gear for the 2-day trip. As she reached for the door handle, her foot hit a patch of black ice. Her legs flew out from under her, and she landed hard on her hip, her suitcase tumbling away. "Whoa there!" The taxi driver jumped out, rushing to her side. He was an older man with salt and pepper hair and a thick Boston accent. "You okay? Lady, that was a nasty fall." "I'm fine," Kathy lied, pain radiating up her side as he helped her to her feet. "Just clumsy." "Ain't nothing clumsy about ice being where it shouldn't," he said, retrieving her suitcase. "It's a menace. You sure you're all right? Nothing broken." "Just my dignity." She attempted a smile, easing herself into the back seat with a wince. As the taxi pulled away from the curb, Kathy realized her phone had died. She couldn't even call Brian to tell him what had happened or ask him to meet her at an ATM. "Where to?" the driver asked, meeting her eyes in the rearview mirror. "I need to stop at an ATM first, if you don't mind," she said. "Then Cambridge, please, Inman Square area." The driver, Ed, according to his license displayed on the dashboard, nodded and navigated carefully through the deserted airport roads. "Coming home from somewhere warm. I hope terrible night to return to Boston." "Chicago," Kathy replied. "For medical tests." The words slipped out before she could stop them. Ed's eyes softened in the mirror. "Everything okay?" Kathy stared out at the swirling snow. "Just some concerns my doctor wanted checked. Nothing definitive yet." They rode in silence until Ed pulled up to an ATM vestibule in East Boston. "I'll wait right here with the meter off," he said, surprising her. "Take your time." Inside the heated vestibule, Kathy inserted her card, punched in her PIN, and requested $60. The machine whirred, then displayed a message that made her stomach drop. "Insufficient funds for this withdrawal." She tried again for $40. Same message. With shaking hands, she requested a balance inquiry. The number on the screen couldn't be right, 1237. There should have been over $800 her careful budget for the month after paying for the Chicago specialists out of pocket. Her emergency medical fund, separate from her regular checking, should have had several thousand more. Feeling suddenly lightheaded, Kathy leaned against the wall. Had there been a mistake identity theft? Or had Brian? No, he wouldn't. Not again. She stumbled back to the taxi, embarrassment burning hotter than the pain in her hip. I'm so sorry, she told Ed, voice cracking. There's some problem with my account. I only have $23 cash. Ed studied her face for a long moment. Where in Cambridge did you say Inman Square? But that'll get you there tonight, he said firmly, putting the car in drive. Cambridge ain't so far in good weather. Tonight's just making it dramatic. I can't ask you to. You didn't ask, ma'am. I offered. Besides, he nodded at her suitcase. You said medical tests. My late wife had more than her share of those. Someone helped us once when we needed it. Just paying it forward. Tears pricked at Kathy's eyes as the taxi pulled back onto the snow-covered street. She couldn't remember the last time a stranger had shown her such kindness. I have a son, she said quietly. He was supposed to pick me up. Ed nodded, keeping his eyes on the treacherous road. Kids, they forget sometimes that we're people too, not just parents. The taxi crawled through the near-deserted streets, windshield wipers fighting a losing battle against the snow. By the time they reached her apartment building, the storm had intensified, howling between the buildings. Here we are, Ed announced, pulling up to the curb. You got someone inside waiting. Kathy thought of her dark, empty apartment. Yes, she lied. Thank you so much. Ed, please take this. She extended the $23, and I'll get your information to pay the rest once I sort out my bank account. Ed waved away the money. Nah, like I said, paying it forward. Just be careful on those steps, they look slick. At least take something for your kindness, she insisted. Tell you what, Ed said, if you really want to thank me, do something nice for someone else when you get the chance. That'll be payment enough. Kathy nodded, throat tight with emotion. I will, I promise. As she carefully navigated the icy steps to her building's entrance, she heard Ed's taxi wait until she was safely inside before pulling away. The small act of consideration nearly broke her composure. Inside her apartment, the silence engulfed her. She switched on a lamp, illuminating the modest living room with its well-worn furniture, each piece with a story, each one a survivor like herself. She downsized after selling the family home in Newton to help fund Brian's first startup 6 years ago. That venture had failed within 18 months, but by then the house was gone, along with the garden she'd tended for 20 years. Her fingers found her phone out of habit before remembering it was dead. She plugged it in and waited for it to gather enough charge to turn on, then tried Brian again. Straight to voicemail. Brian, it's Mom. I'm home safe. No thanks to you, she said, unable to keep the hurt from her voice. Call me when you get this. We need to talk about my bank account. While waiting for the phone to charge further, she ran a hot bath for her aching hip, wincing as she eased into the water. The fall had left an angry purple bruise spreading across her side. Nothing was broken, but at 65, she didn't bounce back from injuries like she once did. In the quiet bathroom, with steam rising around her, Kathy's mind drifted back to her appointment in Chicago. Dr. Reeves had been kind but concerned, ordering additional tests when her mammogram showed suspicious calcifications. The follow-up ultrasound and biopsy had left her sore and frightened, but she'd hidden her fear behind practiced smiles, not wanting to worry Brian before the results came back. She hadn't told him about the appointments at all, claiming instead she was visiting an old college friend. Brian had enough on his plate with his latest business venture. At least that's what she'd told herself. The truth was, she couldn't bear to see that look in his eyes again, the impatient concern that quickly gave way to calculations of how her problems might affect his plans. After her bath, wrapped in her warmest robe, Kathy checked her phone again. One new text from Brian sorry about tonight. Investors ran late. Everything okay. No mention of the money. No real apology. Just checking the box of filial concern. She typed back, we need to talk about my bank account. Money's missing. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then reappeared. Can explain. Investment opportunity came up, borrowed a bit. We'll pay back next week. Kathy stared at the screen, a cold feeling spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the blizzard outside. Borrowed, without asking. Again. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. But what was there to say? This wasn't the first time, just the largest amount. There had been the small loan for new office furniture 3 years ago, the temporary use of her credit card for business expenses last Christmas, the second mortgage on her apartment that somehow had her signature on it, though she remembered signing what Brian had called routine insurance papers. Each time, she convinced herself it was just a phase that soon his business would take off, and everything would be paid back with interest. Each time, she'd believed him when he said this opportunity was different, that success was just around the corner. But tonight, stranded at an airport with no money for a cab, something had shifted inside her. Not broken, she was already broken in too many places to count, but perhaps finally, mercifully, beginning to heal. Too exhausted to confront him further tonight, she simply replied, "We'll talk tomorrow, in person." She turned off her phone, took 2 ibuprofen for her hip, and crawled into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin against the chill that seemed to come as much from within as from the storm outside. Sleep eluded her as her mind raced. How much had he taken? Was the emergency medical fund intact? She'd need that if the biopsy results came back positive. And what about her retirement accounts? Had he somehow gained access to those too? It was past 3 a.m. when Kathy finally drifted into a fitful sleep. Her dreams filled with endless airport terminals where she searched for someone who was always just out of sight. Morning arrived with harsh brightness, sunlight reflecting off fresh snow that had transformed the city overnight. Kathy moved stiffly around her kitchen, her hip protesting each step as she made coffee. Her phone showed no new messages from Brian. She called her bank the moment they opened. "I'd like to check on some recent withdrawals," she told the representative. "I think there may have been some unauthorized activity." 10 minutes and several security questions later, the truth was laid bare: multiple withdrawals over the past month, emptying her checking account and emergency fund. The last one, for $2,000, had been processed yesterday afternoon while she was still in the air. "These were all done with proper ID and your debit card, Mrs. Reynolds," the representative explained. "The largest transactions were done in person at our Boylston Street branch. Brian had her spare debit card for emergencies," he'd said, "and he knew her PIN. She'd trusted him with it years ago after her minor surgery, when she'd needed him to withdraw cash for her prescriptions." "I want to freeze all my accounts immediately," Kathy said, her voice steadier than she felt. "And I need to know what other accounts might have been accessed." The news got worse. A line of credit had been opened in her name. Credit cards she never applied for showed recent activity. Her retirement account had a loan against it, something she'd never authorized. By the time she hung up, Kathy's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold her coffee mug. The scope of the betrayal was staggering. This wasn't opportunistic borrowing. This was systematic financial abuse. She needed help, professional help. After a moment's thought, she called Sarah Jenkins, her oldest friend and former colleague from her teaching days. Sarah had retired early from nursing to care for her husband after a stroke, and she'd warned Kathy about Brian's borrowing for years. "Kathy, what's wrong?" Sarah's voice came through immediately, concern evident. "You never call this early." "I need help, Sarah," Kathy said, her voice breaking. "And I need you not to say, 'I told you so.' Never. Tell me what happened." Kathy explained everything: the airport, the empty accounts, the unauthorized loans. "That little shit," Sarah muttered. "Pardon my French, but honestly, Kathy, this is theft." "I know," Kathy whispered. "Have you called the police?" "He's my son, Sarah. He's a thief who happens to be your son," Sarah countered. "But I understand. Look, my brother-in-law James is an attorney who specializes in elder law. Let me call him for you." "Elder law," Kathy bristled slightly. "I'm not elderly." "No, but you're over 60, and he handles financial abuse cases all the time, many involving family members. Just talk to him. Please." Kathy agreed, and Sarah promised to set up a meeting that afternoon. "And Kathy, don't confront Brian alone. Wait until you've spoken with James." After hanging up, Kathy sat at her kitchen table, staring at the small potted orchid Brian and Vanessa had given her last Mother's Day. Its delicate white blooms seemed to mock her now, a beautiful facade hiding the rot beneath. Her laptop chimed with an incoming email. Automatically, she opened it, then froze. It was from Vanessa to Brian, accidentally copied to Kathy's email, likely a mistake born of similar addresses. The subject line read, "Re-Cape House Strategy." "Brian, I think your mother is getting suspicious. She asked too many questions about the refinancing papers last week. We need to move faster if we're going to get her to sign over the Cape House before summer. Remember, the realtor said waterfront properties are selling within days right now. Did you take care of the Chicago situation? We can use that to our advantage if she's worried about medical bills." Make her see that selling the Cape House is the sensible option, given her situation. Let me know how the investor meeting went. Hope leaving her at the airport wasn't for nothing. V. Kathy read the email 3 times, each word hitting her like a physical blow. The Cape House, her last significant asset, the small waterfront cottage her grandparents had built and her parents had left to her, her sanctuary. The one thing she'd explicitly told Brian was never to be sold, her final inheritance for him after she was gone. And they'd been planning to manipulate her into selling it, using her health concerns, which they somehow knew about, the Chicago situation. Had they been monitoring her medical appointments, reading her emails? The abandonment at the airport hadn't been a scheduling conflict or forgetfulness. It had been deliberate a tactic to make her feel vulnerable, dependent. Kathy's hands stopped shaking. The hurt and confusion crystallized into something harder, colder, more focused. This wasn't just financial opportunism or a son making poor choices. This was calculated exploitation, a long-term strategy to strip her of everything. She picked up her phone and texted Brian. "Something's come up. Can't meet today after all. We'll be in touch soon." Then she called Sarah back. "What time is that appointment with your brother-in-law, and can you come with me? There's been a development." James Sullivan's law office occupied the second floor of a beautifully restored Victorian in Cambridge, not far from Harvard Square. The waiting room featured comfortable leather chairs, soft lighting, and framed black and white photographs of Boston landmarks from the 1950s, a far cry from the sterile, intimidating law offices Kathy had imagined. Sarah sat beside her, a reassuring presence as they waited. "James is good at what he does," she whispered. "Trust him." When the receptionist showed them into his office, Kathy was surprised again. James Sullivan wasn't the stern, gray-haired patriarch she'd expected, but a kind-faced man in his early 70s with a trim white beard and bright blue eyes that crinkled when he smiled. He rose from behind his desk, leaning slightly on a polished wooden cane. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, extending his hand, "Sarah's told me a bit about your situation. I'm very sorry you're going through this." "Thank you for seeing me on such short notice," Kathy replied, taking the offered seat across from him. "Family financial exploitation cases need immediate attention," he said matter-of-factly. "The longer we wait, the more assets can disappear." He opened a notebook. "Now, why don't you tell me exactly what's happened, and then we'll discuss your options." For the next 30 minutes, Kathy detailed everything: the missing money, the unauthorized loans, the credit cards, and finally, the accidentally forwarded email about the Cape House. James took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but mostly listening intently. When she finished, he set down his pen and leaned forward. "Mrs. Reynolds, what your son has done constitutes elder financial abuse and identity theft, both criminal offenses in Massachusetts. The email about the Cape property suggests premeditation and ongoing conspiracy to defraud." Kathy flinched at the legal terms. "I don't want to send my son to jail," she said quietly. "Many of my clients feel the same way." James acknowledged. "The good news is, we have options that don't necessarily involve criminal charges, at least not immediately. Our priority is to secure your remaining assets and recover what we can." He outlined a plan: freeze all accounts, place a fraud alert on her credit, document everything, create a new secure account at a different bank, and file for emergency injunctions to prevent any property transfers. "What about my retirement accounts?" Kathy asked. "I was planning to start drawing from them next year." "We'll need to contact each financial institution separately," James explained. "The loan against your 401k is particularly concerning. Those have strict rules about consent and approval." "And my medical situation," Kathy added hesitantly. "I'm waiting for test results from specialists in Chicago. If it's cancer, I'll need access to funds for treatment." "My insurance won't cover everything." Sarah reached over and squeezed her hand. This was the first she'd heard about Kathy's medical concerns. James nodded gravely. "All the more reason to act quickly. Medical costs can be catastrophic without proper financial preparation." He made another note. "Do you have any reason to believe your son knows about your medical situation?" "According to Vanessa's email, yes," Kathy said, "though I never told them." "They could have been monitoring your email or phone," Sarah suggested. "Or maybe they found the paperwork from your doctor." James frowned. "That raises additional privacy concerns. Mrs. Reynolds, I recommend we take immediate action today. My assistant can help you file the necessary paperwork to freeze your accounts and credit. We should also change all your passwords and set up monitoring on your credit report." "What about Brian? When do I confront him?" "Not yet," James advised. "First, we secure what's left. Then we gather evidence of what's been taken. Only then do we confront, with documentation in hand and legal protections in place." It made sense, but the thought of the deception pretending everything was normal while secretly working against her own son made Kathy's stomach turn. I know this is difficult, James said gently, seeming to read her thoughts. But remember, you didn't start this deception. You're simply protecting yourself from further harm. Kathy nodded, straightening her shoulders. What do we do first? The next morning, Kathy stood outside the glass doors of Brian's office building in downtown Boston, her heart hammering in her chest. After spending yesterday with James's team, securing her accounts and documenting the unauthorized withdrawals, she'd made a decision she needed proof, hard evidence that couldn't be explained away as borrowing or misunderstandings. Sarah had tried to talk her out of it. Let James handle the investigation, she'd insisted. This is dangerous. But Kathy knew things about Brian's habits and office that investigators wouldn't. She knew he kept a spare key taped under his desk drawer. She knew he rarely shredded documents, believing digital security was all that mattered. And she knew that on Wednesday mornings, he and his entire team had a standing breakfast meeting at the cafe 2 blocks away. Now, she took a deep breath and entered the lobby, her story prepared. At the security desk, she smiled at the guard, a young man she'd never seen before. Good morning, she said pleasantly. I'm Catherine Reynolds, Brian Reynolds' mother. I was supposed to meet him to sign some paperwork, but he's not answering his phone. Probably in that breakfast meeting. She laughed lightly. He told me I could wait in his office if he was running late. Is that all right? The guard hesitated. I'm supposed to call up for visitors. Of course, Kathy nodded. His direct line is 617-555-8240. The guard dialed, and as expected, got no answer. He's not picking up, ma'am. Like I said, breakfast meeting. Kathy sighed. Look, I've been here many times. You can check the visitor logs. I'm sure your colleague is it Miguel, who usually works mornings, would recognize me. The name drop worked. The guard relaxed slightly. Miguel's out sick today, but if you've been here before. He pushed a visitor log toward her. Just sign in, and I'll need to see some ID. Kathy signed the log and produced her driver's license, praying the guard wouldn't notice her shaking hands. 8th floor, right, she asked, retrieving her ID. Suite 804, the guard confirmed, handing her a visitor badge. Elevators are to your right. Inside the elevator, Kathy let out the breath she'd been holding. First hurdle cleared, but the real challenge lay ahead. The 8th floor was quiet, most offices still dark this early. Suite 804's glass door was locked, but Kathy knew the code Brian's birth year, something she'd chided him for being too obvious when he'd mentioned it. She punched in 1987, and the door clicked open. Brian's private office was at the back, overlooking the harbor. Kathy moved quickly, aware that she might have 30 minutes at most before someone returned. The office was messier than she expected, papers strewn across the desk, empty coffee cups perched precariously on stacks of folders, a half-eaten protein bar abandoned next to the keyboard. She started with the desk drawers, finding the key exactly where she remembered taped underneath the top right drawer. The locked bottom drawer slid open to reveal hanging files, neatly labeled unlike the chaos above. Her fingers moved quickly through the tabs. Investments, contracts, personal, real estate. She pulled the last one, heart pounding. Inside were several folders. One labeled Cape Property caught her eye immediately. She opened it to find documents she'd never seen before, a property assessment from 3 months ago, printouts of comparable sales in the area, a draft listing agreement with a real estate agency, and most disturbingly, what appeared to be a power of attorney document with her signature on it. Except it wasn't her signature. It was close enough to fool someone who didn't know better. But the C was all wrong, and she never looped her Y that way. Hands shaking, she used her phone to photograph each document, making sure to capture the forgery clearly. Then she moved on to the personal file. This folder contained bank statements, her bank statements going back 6 months. Account numbers were highlighted, with notes in Brian's handwriting about withdrawal limits and automatic payments. There was also a copy of her credit report, her social security card, and a photocopy of her passport. Most chilling of all was a printed email exchange between Brian and someone named Dr. Costas, discussing elderly care options and memory care facilities. The most recent email, dated just last week, referenced increasing signs of confusion and financial mismanagement, and the need for intervention before assets are depleted. They were building a case to declare her incompetent, to take control of everything. Kathy photographed it all, working as quickly as her trembling hands would allow. In the investments folder, she found records of where her money had actually gone, not to business expenses or temporary cash flow issues, but to luxury purchases, high-risk cryptocurrency investments, and payments to creditors she'd known nothing about. A sound from the outer office made her freeze voices, getting closer. Hastily, she replaced the folders, locked the drawer, and returned the key to its hiding place. She grabbed her purse and looked for somewhere to hide, but the voices were right outside the door now. I'm telling you, she knows something, came Brian's voice, tense and irritated. That email about the Chicago tests, she never mentioned any tests to me? Maybe because she knew you'd try to use it against her, Vanessa replied, her tone equally sharp. You're not exactly subtle, Brian. The door handle turned. Kathy stood rooted to the spot, clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. Brian stopped abruptly in the doorway, his expression cycling rapidly from surprise to confusion to barely concealed anger. Mom, what are you doing here? Vanessa appeared behind him, her perfectly made-up face carefully neutral except for her eyes, which narrowed suspiciously. Kathy's mind raced for an explanation. The truth was out of the question. She forced a smile. I was hoping to catch you before your meeting. My phone died last night, and I realized I never properly thanked you for the lovely orchid you sent last month. Brian stared at her as if she'd grown a second head. You came all the way downtown? For that? Well, and to ask about lunch sometime this week, Kathy added, moving toward the door. But I see you're busy. We can talk later. She tried to step past them, but Brian moved to block her exit, his larger frame suddenly intimidating in the confined space. How did you get in here? He asked, voice deceptively calm. The security guard let me up. I told him I was meeting you. Not technically a lie. My office was locked. Kathy's heart hammered. No, it wasn't. The door was open. A lie, but a necessary one. Brian and Vanessa exchanged a look that Kathy couldn't interpret. Mom, Brian said slowly, as if speaking to a child. Have you been forgetting things lately, getting confused? The trap was so obvious it would have been laughable if it weren't so terrifying. They were laying groundwork, creating witnesses to her confusion. Not at all, she replied firmly. My memory is excellent. For instance, I remember exactly how much money was in my checking account before I left for Chicago, and exactly how much was missing when I returned. Brian's expression hardened, but Vanessa stepped smoothly between them. Kathy, we've been meaning to talk to you about that. Brian was just trying to help manage things while you were away. We're concerned about some of your financial decisions lately. Such as, Kathy challenged, her fear giving way to indignation. The excessive medical tests, for one, Vanessa said. 3 specialists in Chicago. That's thousands of dollars out of pocket. So, they have been monitoring her medical appointments. The violation made Kathy's skin crawl. My health decisions are not your concern, she said coldly, and neither are my finances. They are when you're making irrational choices. Brian interjected. Mom, we're worried about you. These memory lapses, the unnecessary medical tests, the paranoia about your accounts. Paranoia? Kathy's voice rose despite her best efforts. You took over $10,000 without permission. I was protecting it, Brian insisted. You've been acting erratically, making large withdrawals, changing investment strategies. I was consolidating everything to keep it safe until we could get you proper help. The calculated gaslighting was breathtaking. For a moment, Kathy almost doubted herself had she been forgetful, made withdrawals she didn't remember. No, this was exactly what they wanted to make her question her own sanity. I think I should go, she said, steadying her voice with effort. We can discuss this another time. We need to discuss it now, Brian pressed, still blocking the door. We have appointments with some excellent doctors who can help with cognitive assessments, and there's a wonderful assisted living community in Newton we should tour. I'm not going to any assisted living community, Kathy said firmly. Now, please let me pass. Mom, be reasonable. Let me pass. Each word was iron. Something in her tone must have reached him. Brian hesitated, then stepped aside. This conversation isn't over, he said as she walked past. We're genuinely concerned. Mom, think about it. Kathy didn't respond. She kept her pace measured until she reached the elevator, forcing herself not to run. Only when the doors closed behind her did she allow herself to lean against the wall, legs suddenly weak. They were moving faster than she'd anticipated. The elaborate gaslighting, the forgeries, the plans for assisted living. It was all happening now, not some future threat. As the elevator descended, Kathy pulled out her phone and called James Sullivan. They know, she said when he answered, and they're accelerating their plans. But I have evidence now, photos of everything. Come straight to my office, James instructed. Don't go home, don't contact them again, and Kathy, well done. The pain hit while she was showing James the photos. A sudden, crushing pressure in her chest that made her gasp mid-sentence. Mrs. Reynolds? James looked up, alarmed. Are you all right? Just need a minute, she managed, but the pain intensified, radiating down her left arm. The room tilted alarmingly. Sarah, James called sharply to his sister-in-law, who was waiting in the outer office. Get in here. Sarah took one look at Kathy's gray face and grabbed her wrist, checking her pulse. Call 911, she told James. She's having a cardiac event. The next few minutes blurred, Sarah's calm, professional voice asking questions. James on the phone with emergency services, the room spinning. Kathy, Sarah's face swam into focus. Have you had heart problems before? No, just the tests. In Chicago. Kathy gasped. What tests exactly, mammogram? But also? Heart scan, doctor said. Heart murmur. When did you last take aspirin? This morning. For my hip. Sarah nodded. That might help. Try to stay calm. Ambulance is on its way. Kathy wanted to explain about the specialists in Chicago, how they'd found the murmur while checking for cancer, how they'd scheduled her for additional cardiac tests next month, but the pain made it impossible to speak. She was aware of being moved, of an oxygen mask being placed over her face, of Sarah holding her hand in the ambulance. The paramedics asked questions she couldn't answer, administered medications that made her head swim. At the hospital, everything accelerated. Doctors, nurses, machines beeping, words like cardiac episode and stress-induced floated around her. More tests. An IV. Sarah's steady presence beside her bed. Hours later, a cardiologist with kind eyes explained that she hadn't had a full heart attack, but a serious warning sign. Your tests show significant blockage in one coronary artery, he said. We need to place a stent, and soon. The procedure isn't particularly risky, but without insurance approval, the costs would be. I have insurance, Kathy said weakly. Yes, but your policy has a high deductible, and you've already had significant out-of-pocket expenses this year, according to your records. The total could exceed $20,000. The amount would have wiped out her emergency medical fund, the one Brian had already emptied. I see, she whispered. There are assistance programs, the doctor began. But Kathy was no longer listening, her mind racing through limited options. Later, after the doctor left, Sarah squeezed her hand. James is working on expediting everything, she said. We'll figure out the money. Your health comes first. Kathy nodded, too exhausted to argue. Has anyone called Brian? Sarah hesitated. The hospital would have contacted your emergency contact. Is that him? Yes. Despite everything, a part of Kathy still expected, still wanted her son to rush to her bedside, to be the boy who had once brought her dandelions when she was sad. But hours passed, and Brian didn't come. Just before midnight, Kathy's phone buzzed with a text. At hospital now, but visiting hours over. They won't let me up. How serious is it? Should we postpone the Cape House showing next week, Sarah? Reading over her shoulder, made a disgusted noise. Unbelievable. Actually, it's perfectly believable, Kathy said with surprising calm and clarifying. She turned off her phone without replying and closed her eyes, suddenly clear about what needed to be done. Dr. Eleanor Morales found Kathy in the hospital's small courtyard garden the next morning, sitting on a bench with her face tilted up to the spring sunshine. Mrs. Reynolds, the psychiatrist asked, I'm Dr. Morales. The cardiac team asked me to speak with you. Kathy opened her eyes, regarding the newcomer warily. She was an elegant woman about Kathy's age, with silver-streaked dark hair and intelligent eyes behind stylish glasses. If you're here to evaluate my mental competence, I can save us both time, Kathy said. I'm perfectly sound of mind, just having a rather eventful week. Dr. Morales smiled, taking a seat beside her. Actually, I'm here because heart episodes often have psychological components. Stress is a significant cardiac risk factor, and your doctors mentioned you've been under considerable strain. That's one way to put it, Kathy admitted. Would you like to talk about it? No assessments, no evaluations, just talking. Something about the doctor's direct manner made Kathy trust her. Over the next hour, she found herself sharing everything: the financial exploitation, the gaslighting, the planned institutionalization, even the evidence she'd gathered from Brian's office. Dr. Morales listened without interruption, occasionally making notes but mostly maintaining steady eye contact. When Kathy finished, she set her notebook aside. What you're describing is a textbook case of elder financial abuse, with components of psychological manipulation, she said matter-of-factly. But you know that already. What you might not know is how common it is, or how it's affected your health. My heart, you mean, yes, but not just physically. Financial exploitation by family members creates a unique kind of trauma, a betrayal trauma. It damages your sense of security, your ability to trust, even your identity as a parent. The words struck Kathy like physical blows. I keep asking myself what I did wrong, she admitted, where I failed as a mother. This isn't your failure, Dr. Morales said firmly. Your son made choices harmful, exploitative choices. Understanding why he made them might be important eventually. But right now, your priority has to be protection and recovery. How do I even begin to recover from this, one step at a time? Dr. La Morales said. First, physical health, then financial security, then emotional healing. She hesitated. Mrs. Reynolds, I run a support group for survivors of family financial abuse. Most members are over 50, and many are parents like yourself. Would you consider joining us when you're discharged? I'm not sure I'm ready to share this with strangers, Kathy said. Just think about it, Dr. Morales suggested, handing her a card. We meet Thursday evenings at the community center near Harvard Square. No pressure, no commitment. After the psychiatrist left, Kathy remained in the garden, turning the card over in her hands. The thought of sharing her shame and betrayal with a room full of strangers was daunting, but the alternative facing this alone seemed even more impossible. Her phone buzzed with a text from James Sullivan Judge, granted emergency injunction against property transfers. All accounts frozen. Call when you can. A small victory, but significant. For the first time in days, Kathy felt something like hope. As she prepared to return to her room, a hospital volunteer approached with a vase of fresh flowers. Delivery for Catherine Reynolds, the young woman announced. Kathy accepted the arrangement spring tulips in vibrant yellow and red and checked the card. Thinking of you. Healing takes time, but you're not alone. Sarah and the Thursday group. The Thursday group must be Dr. Morales' support group. The gesture touched Kathy deeply. These strangers cared more about her recovery than her own son had. Back in her room, she found Brian waiting, pacing the small space like a caged animal. He spun around when she entered, his expression a carefully constructed mask of concern. Mom, there you are. The nurses wouldn't tell me anything because of privacy rules. He stepped forward as if to embrace her, then seemed to think better of it. How are you feeling? Better, Kathy said cautiously, setting the flowers on the side table. They're putting in a stent tomorrow. Brian nodded, glancing at her chart. And after that, how long until you're back to normal? There's a recovery period, she said. Several weeks at least. Weeks. He ran a hand through his hair, distress flashing across his face. That complicates things. What things, Brian? Just arrangements for your care. He cleared his throat. Actually, that's partly why I'm here. The doctors think you'll need significant help during recovery. They've suggested a short-term care facility might be best, especially given your living situation. Kathy doubted very much that any doctor had suggested this. My living situation is fine, she said evenly. Mom, you live alone in a second-floor walk-up with no elevator, with a heart condition. Coronary artery disease, Kathy corrected. Not congestive heart failure. The stent will resolve the immediate issue. Still, stairs after heart surgery. And who's going to help with meals, medications, driving to follow-up appointments? Brian spread his hands in a gesture of exaggerated concern. I found a wonderful place in Newton. Private rooms, excellent care, and they can take you directly from hospital discharge. Newton was convenient for Brian, Kathy noted, but an hour from her Cambridge apartment by public transportation effectively isolating her from her friends and support system. I've made other arrangements, she said. Brian blinked, momentarily thrown off script. What arrangements? Sarah Jenkins will be staying with me for the first week. After that, I'll have home health aides as needed. This was news to Kathy as well as Brian, but she knew Sarah would agree. My insurance covers it. That's not a sustainable plan, Brian argued. Sarah has her own life, and home health only covers a few hours a day. What about the rest of the time? I'll manage. This is exactly what I'm worried about, Brian said, his voice taking on a patronizing tone. You're not thinking clearly about your needs. After a cardiac event, confusion is common. I'm not confused, Brian, Kathy interrupted, her patience evaporating. I'm angry. He had the audacity to look wounded. Angry at me for trying to help. Is that what you call emptying my bank accounts? Helping? Brian's expression hardened. So that's what this is about. Money. Again. No, it's about trust and betrayal. Kathy's voice remained steady, though her heart raced dangerously. It's about finding out my son has been systematically stealing from me, forging my signature, and planning to declare me incompetent so he can take everything I have left. Brian's face drained of color. What are you talking about? That's ridiculous. Should we discuss the power of attorney document with my forged signature, or the emails about selling the Cape House, or perhaps the consultations with memory care facilities? His shock was genuine. How did you? No, that's not important. What matters is that I do know, and it stops now. Brian's shock quickly morphed into anger. You went through my office, he accused. You had no right. I had no right. Kathy's laugh was bitter. That's rich, coming from someone who stole $10,000 from his mother's medical fund. I was going to pay it back. With what the proceeds from selling my house, a house you have no legal right to sell? By the way, Brian's eyes narrowed. You've been talking to lawyers? Yes. So that's how it's going to be. He stepped closer, his height suddenly intimidating. You're going to sue your own son, turn this into some legal battle, because I can promise you, Mom, you won't win. Not with your medical history, your age, your increasingly erratic behavior. The threat was unmistakable. For a moment, fear flickered through Kathy. Fear of the legal battle ahead, of losing everything, of being declared incompetent and institutionalized against her will. But beneath the fear, something stronger burned resolve. Actually, Brian, I think I will win, she said quietly. I have documentation of the forgery, bank records of the unauthorized withdrawals, evidence of a coordinated plan to exploit me financially, and, as of this morning, a court order preventing you from accessing or transferring any of my assets. Brian stared at her, momentarily speechless. Then his face contorted with rage. You conniving old Mr. Reynolds? A nurse appeared in the doorway, her expression stern. I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Mrs. Reynolds' heart rate is spiking, and she needs rest before tomorrow's procedure. Brian glanced at the heart monitor, which was indeed showing elevated numbers. For a second, Kathy thought he might argue, but then he snatched up his coat. This isn't over, he muttered as he brushed past the nurse. No, Kathy agreed softly. It's just beginning. After he left, the nurse checked Kathy's vitals with practiced efficiency. Family trouble, she asked sympathetically. You could say that, Kathy replied. Try not to stress about it before your procedure. Focus on healing first. She adjusted Kathy's IV. Those are lovely flowers. From your son, Kathy looked at the bright tulips. No, she said, from my friends, my real friends. The nurse nodded understandingly and left. Kathy leaned back against the pillows, physically exhausted but mentally more alert than she'd felt in months. The confrontation had been painful, but necessary a lance to a festering wound. Brian would fight back. She had no illusions about that. He had resources, a convincing manner, and years of practice manipulating her. The battle ahead would be difficult, possibly devastating, but for the first time in years, Kathy felt the stirring of something she'd almost forgotten: her own power. She had truth on her side, evidence, friends, legal protection, and most importantly, she had herself, the self she'd surrendered piece by piece, year after year, to maternal guilt and misplaced loyalty. That self was awakening now, rising from the ashes of betrayal, stronger and more determined than ever. Tomorrow would bring the heart procedure, pain, and a long physical recovery, but it would also bring the first day of her reclaimed life, a life where the strings that had bound her guilt, obligation, unquestioning trust were finally cut. As Kathy drifted toward sleep, she thought of the Cape House waiting for her, its weathered shingles and salt-sprayed windows overlooking the endless Atlantic. She would go there to heal, to rebuild, to rediscover the woman she'd been before she became simply Brian's mother. And this time, no one would take it from her, not her house, not her dignity, not her future, not ever again. The stent procedure went smoothly, a small metal scaffold inserted through a catheter in Kathy's wrist, threading its way to her heart to prop open the narrowed artery. She was awake but sedated during the process, aware of the cardiologist's calm instructions, the nurse's efficient movements, the strange pressure in her chest that wasn't quite pain. Looking good, Mrs. Reynolds, the doctor murmured, eyes fixed on the monitor displaying her heart's intricate plumbing. One more. There. Perfect placement. Afterward, in the recovery room, she drifted in and out of consciousness, vaguely aware of Sarah sitting beside her bed, a silent guardian against both medical complications and unwanted visitors. He tried to come, Sarah told her later, when Kathy was more alert. Brian said he had power of attorney and demanded updates. What happened? Kathy asked, her voice hoarse from the breathing tube they'd inserted during the procedure. Sarah's smile was grim. Your lawyer happened. James was waiting in the surgical waiting room with the court order. The hospital administration backed him completely. Relief washed over Kathy. Thank you, she whispered, for everything. That's what friends are for. Sarah adjusted Kathy's pillows. Besides, I've been waiting 20 years to see that son of yours get what's coming to him. No offense. Despite everything. Kathy laughed a small, painful sound that tugged at her bandaged wrist. None taken. The next 3 days passed in a blur of medication schedules, cardiac rehab assessments, and discharge planning. True to her word, Sarah arranged to stay in Kathy's guest room for the first week of her recovery. James visited daily, bringing updates on the legal proceedings and occasionally a contraband chocolate chip cookie from the bakery near his office. On the morning of her discharge, Dr. Morales stopped by for a final check-in. How are you feeling emotionally? She asked, settling into the visitor's chair. Stronger than I expected, Kathy admitted. Scared about what comes next, but clearer. Dr. Morales nodded. That clarity is valuable. Hold on to it. The coming weeks won't be easy physically or emotionally. I know, Kathy hesitated. I've been thinking about your support group. Is the offer still open? Of course. We meet this Thursday at 7. She scribbled an address on her prescription pad. No pressure to share until you're ready. Just come. Listen. I'd like that. Kathy tucked the paper into her purse. Though I'm not sure what I could offer to others. You'd be surprised, Dr. Morales said with a small smile. Sometimes the newest members provide the most important perspective. They remind the rest of us that recovery is possible, that the fog does lift. After the psychiatrist left, Kathy sat quietly, contemplating the journey ahead. The medical recovery would be straightforward medications, exercise, follow-up appointments. The emotional and legal recovery seemed far more daunting. Sarah interrupted her thoughts, arriving with a wheelchair and a duffel bag of clothes. Your chariot awaits, madam, she announced. Ready to blow this pop cycle stand. Kathy smiled at her friend's forced cheerfulness. More than ready. The ride to her Cambridge apartment was tense, both women scanning for Brian's car, but the street was clear when they arrived. Inside, however, the apartment felt different, disturbed somehow, though nothing was obviously missing or moved. Someone's been here, Kathy said, her skin prickling. Sarah frowned, looking around. Are you sure nothing seems out of place? I'm sure. Kathy moved slowly through the living room, noting subtle differences, a drawer not quite closed, a book slightly askew on the shelf, the faint scent of unfamiliar cologne lingering in the air. She checked her bedroom next, then the small home office where she kept her important papers. The filing cabinet appeared untouched, still locked with the key hidden in her jewelry box. But when she opened her desk drawer, she knew immediately her checkbook was missing. Call James, she told Sarah, her voice tight. We need to check if any checks have been written since I've been in the hospital. While Sarah made the call, Kathy continued her inspection, finding other small items missing her spare house key, a folder containing her insurance information, and most concerning, her passport. James is on it, Sarah reported, ending the call. He's contacting your bank immediately to stop any checks and add extra security. What else is missing? Kathy told her, and Sarah's expression darkened. He's collecting identity documents. This is getting serious. Kathy, it was always serious, Kathy replied, sinking into her favorite armchair. I just didn't want to see it. The apartment no longer felt like a sanctuary. It had been violated, just as her trust had been. But unlike her bank accounts or her Cape house, the sense of safety in her own home wasn't something that could be protected with court orders or injunctions. Maybe we should stay somewhere else, Sarah suggested, seeming to read her thoughts. My place, or even a hotel for a few days. Kathy shook her head. No, I won't be driven from my home. She straightened her shoulders. But we are changing the locks. Today. By Thursday evening, Kathy's apartment had new locks, a basic security system, and additional protections on all her accounts. James had confirmed that Brian had indeed attempted to write checks from her account, but the bank had flagged and stopped the transactions thanks to the fraud alert. Now, Kathy stood outside the Cambridge Community Center, staring at the modest brick building with trepidation. Inside, Dr. Morales' support group was already gathering. She could see shadows moving behind the frosted glass of a first-floor meeting room. You can do this, she whispered to herself, clutching her purse strap like a lifeline. The sound of footsteps made her turn. Dr. Morales approached, carrying a tray of coffee cups. Mrs. Reynolds, she greeted warmly. I'm glad you came. Would you mind getting the door for me? The simple request broke the spell of Kathy's hesitation. She held the door, following the psychiatrist into the building and down a short hallway to a room where about a dozen people sat in a circle of folding chairs. The group members looked ordinary, mostly older adults, a few middle-aged men and women from various backgrounds. No one appeared obviously traumatized or broken. They chatted amicably as they helped themselves to coffee and cookies from a side table. Everyone, Dr. Morales called gently. I'd like to introduce Catherine Reynolds. She's joining us tonight. Friendly nods and murmured greetings met this announcement. A slim woman with cropped gray hair patted the empty chair beside her. Come sit by me, she offered. I'm Margaret, but everyone calls me Peggy. Kathy took the offered seat, accepting a styrofoam cup of coffee from Dr. Morales. We usually start with a check-in, Peggy explained quietly. Just a brief update on how you're doing. You can pass if you want, most new people do. Dr. Morales took her seat in the circle. Let's begin, she said. Who would like to start tonight's check-in? A distinguished-looking man in his 70s raised his hand. I'll go. I'm Richard. This week has been difficult. My son's attorney sent another letter demanding I drop the charges. Said if I don't, they'll petition for guardianship based on paranoid behavior. He laughed without humor. Apparently, protecting your own money from theft is considered paranoid now. Murmurs of understanding rippled through the group. How are you feeling about that threat? Dr. Morales asked. Richard squared his shoulders. Scared, but resolved. My new attorney says we have solid evidence of the financial exploitation. The guardianship attempt is just intimidation. Good for you, said a woman across the circle. Stand your ground. The check-ins continued around the circle stories of small victories and setbacks, moments of strength and vulnerability. Kathy listened, increasingly stunned by the similarities to her own situation. Different details, different relationships, but the same patterns of manipulation, gaslighting, and exploitation. When it came to her turn, she hesitated, then surprised herself by speaking. I'm Kathy. My son has been taking money from my accounts for years. Small amounts at first, then larger. When I confronted him, he claimed he was protecting me from my own bad decisions. Her voice broke slightly. I just got out of the hospital after a cardiac episode. He tried to use that to have me placed in a care facility, one where he'd have complete control. She expected to feel shame as she spoke, but instead felt only relief, the unburdening that comes from speaking truth among those who truly understand. Thank you for sharing, Kathy, Dr. Morales said gently. That took courage. The main discussion that evening focused on boundary setting, how to establish and maintain healthy boundaries with family members who had violated trust. Some members had cut contact completely. Others maintained limited, carefully structured relationships. A few were still working through the legal process of protecting their assets and autonomy. The hardest part for me, shared an elegant woman named Beatrice, was accepting that my daughter wasn't going to change. I kept thinking, if I just explain it differently, if I just give her one more chance, she'll understand what she's doing to me. But she did understand. That was the point. She just didn't care. How did you come to terms with that? Kathy asked. Beatrice's smile was sad, but steady. Time, therapy, and this group. Eventually, I realized that protecting myself wasn't a betrayal of her. It was an act of self-preservation. After the formal meeting ended, people lingered, chatting in small groups. Peggy touched Kathy's arm lightly. First meetings are overwhelming, she said. How are you holding up? Better than I expected, Kathy admitted. It helps, knowing I'm not alone in this. None of us are, though it feels that way at first. Peggy handed her a business card. I run a small real estate office specializing in senior transitions. If you ever need advice about housing options, not care facilities, she added with a knowing look. Just safer, more appropriate housing, give me a call. Thank you. Kathy tucked the card into her purse. Actually, I have a small cottage on Cape Cod. I've been thinking about making it my primary residence. The Cape is lovely, Peggy nodded. Good community there, especially for retirees. If you decide to move, I can help you sell your Cambridge place. No pressure, though. As Kathy prepared to leave, Dr. Morales approached. Will we see you next week? Yes, Kathy said without hesitation. I think this is exactly what I need right now. Outside, the spring evening was cool but pleasant, with stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Kathy decided to walk the short distance home, needing time to process the meeting. She was so lost in thought that she didn't notice the figure leaning against a car near her building until she was almost at her front steps. Mom! Kathy startled, her hand flying to her chest. Brian stepped forward into the glow of the street lamp, his handsome face set in lines of concern. Brian, what are you doing here? Waiting for you. We need to talk. He glanced at her building. You changed the locks. Yes? Why don't you trust me? His tone was injured, as if she'd committed some inexplicable offense. No, Kathy said simply. I don't. He flinched, then recovered. Look, I know things got heated at the hospital. I said things I shouldn't have. But this legal battle is unnecessary. We're family. We should be able to work this out between us. Like you worked out emptying my bank accounts, or forging my signature, or breaking into my apartment while I was in the hospital. Brian had the grace to look uncomfortable. I didn't break in. I have a key. Had a key. And you took things that weren't yours again. I was gathering documents for the hospital, he insisted. They needed insurance information, ID. The hospital had all my information on file. Kathy cut him off. And they certainly didn't need my passport or checkbook. Brian's expression hardened. Where were you tonight? Another secret meeting with lawyers. That's none of your business. It is when you're making decisions that affect both of us based on paranoid suspicions. Paranoid? Kathy laughed incredulously. Brian, I have bank statements showing you withdrew over $10,000 without permission. I have photos of forged documents from your office. I have an email from your wife discussing how to manipulate me into selling my Cape house. These aren't suspicions. They're facts. Brian stepped closer, lowering his voice. Mom, I'm worried about you. These conspiracy theories, these accusations, they're symptoms. The doctors mentioned confusion and paranoia can be side effects of your heart medication. Please, let me help you get the care you need. For a moment, Kathy felt a flicker of doubt. Could she be misinterpreting everything? Was her mind playing tricks? No. This was exactly what the support group had warned about: the gaslighting, the manipulation, the expert way abusers made their victims question their own perceptions. The only thing I need, she said firmly, is for you to return what you've taken and then leave me alone. You don't mean that? I do. Kathy moved toward her building entrance. Any further communication needs to go through my attorney. Brian's face darkened. So, that's it. After everything I've done for you, you're just cutting me off, treating me like a criminal. The sheer audacity of his self-pity sparked something in Kathy, not the hurt or guilt she might have felt before, but a clear, cold anger. What exactly have you done for me, Brian? She asked quietly. Besides, take my money, forge my signature, and try to have me institutionalized. I've been there for you, who drove you to doctor's appointments, who helped with your taxes, who checked on you after Dad died. Sarah drove me to most appointments. I paid an accountant for my taxes until you insisted on helping. And after your father died, you visited exactly twice in the first month, then disappeared for 6 weeks. The memories came clearly now, unvarnished by maternal affection. Meanwhile, I sold my home to fund your first failed business. I emptied my savings for your second attempt. I co-signed loans I'm still paying off. I've been your safety net for 20 years, and all you've done is take. Brian's expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally, calculation. Is that what your new friends have been telling you? That I'm some kind of predator? They don't know me, Mom. They don't know everything I've sacrificed for my business, for our future. Our future, Kathy repeated. There is no our future, Brian. There's your future, which you're responsible for as an adult. And there's my future, which I intend to protect. She turned away, climbing the steps to her building entrance. Behind her, Brian called out, his voice suddenly desperate. You need me, Mom. Who's going to take care of you? You can't manage alone. You've got heart problems. You're getting older. What happens when you fall, or get confused, or need help in the middle of the night? Kathy paused, hand on the door. I have friends. I have doctors. I have a lawyer. And I have myself. She looked back at him, standing alone in the pool of lamplight. I don't need you, Brian. Not anymore. She entered the building, closing the door firmly behind her. Through the glass, she watched her son stare after her for a long moment, then turn and walk stiffly back to his car. Inside her apartment, Sarah waited anxiously. I saw him from the window, she said. Are you okay? Kathy nodded, surprising herself with how steady she felt. I am, for the first time in years. I think I really am. The legal battle unfolded over the next 2 months with grinding slowness. Brian hired an expensive attorney who filed motion after motion, each designed to delay proceedings and drain Kathy's resources. He presented himself as a concerned son trying to protect his cognitively declining mother from financial predators, including, ironically, her own lawyer. But James Sullivan proved more than equal to the challenge. With methodical precision, he documented every unauthorized withdrawal, every forged document, every attempt to access Kathy's accounts. He gathered affidavits from her doctors, confirming her mental competence, and from friends testifying to Brian's pattern of financial exploitation. The turning point came unexpectedly, via a phone call from James on a warm June afternoon. "We've had a break," he told Kathy, excitement evident in his usually measured voice. "A former business partner of Brian's reached out to me. He has documentation of Brian using investor funds, including money taken from your accounts for personal expenses, luxury vacations, a boat, high-end restaurants. How did he find you?" Kathy asked, stunned. Apparently, he saw a notice about our case in the legal journal and connected the dots. He's been trying to recover his own investment for over a year. James paused. "Kathy, this isn't just financial exploitation anymore. This is potential fraud. Criminal charges could be on the table." The news should have been satisfying vindication after months of struggle. Instead, Kathy felt a complicated grief. Despite everything, the thought of her son facing criminal charges was painful. "What options do we have?" she asked quietly. "We could use this as leverage for a settlement," James suggested. "Drop the potential criminal complaint in exchange for full financial restitution and legally binding protections for your assets going forward." "Would that work?" "It might, especially if Brian understands the alternative is worse." James hesitated. "The wild card is Vanessa. From what you've told me, she's been deeply involved in this scheme." Kathy thought of her daughter-in-law, beautiful, ambitious Vanessa, who had always treated her with a thin veneer of politeness, concealing obvious disdain. What would she do when faced with potential legal consequences? The answer came the very next day, in the form of an unexpected visitor to Kathy's Thursday support group. Kathy had just settled into her usual seat beside Peggy when the door opened and Vanessa walked in, looking uncharacteristically disheveled. Her designer outfit was creased, her normally perfect makeup slightly smudged, as if applied in haste. The room fell silent. Dr. Morales rose smoothly. "Can I help you?" "I'm looking for Catherine Reynolds," Vanessa said, her voice strained. Her gaze found Kathy in the circle. "I need to speak with you, privately." Dr. Morales glanced at Kathy. "That's up to Mrs. Reynolds." All eyes turned to Kathy, who felt suddenly exposed. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. 5 minutes. They stepped into a small office adjacent to the meeting room, Dr. Morales following at a discreet distance to stand guard by the door. "What do you want, Vanessa?" Kathy asked once they were alone. Vanessa paced the small space, agitation evident in every movement. "This has to stop," she said. "The lawyers, the courts, it's destroying everything." "That wasn't my choice," Kathy pointed out. "Brian stole from me. He forged documents. He broke into my home." "I know." Vanessa stopped pacing, meeting Kathy's eyes directly for perhaps the first time. "I know what he did. What we did." The admission hung in the air between them. "Then you understand why this can't just stop," Kathy said. "Not without consequences." "What if—" Vanessa hesitated. "What if I gave you proof evidence that would strengthen your case? In exchange for immunity for myself?" Kathy stared at her daughter-in-law, trying to reconcile this desperate woman with the polished, confident Vanessa she thought she knew. "Why would you do that?" Vanessa's hand went unconsciously to her midsection, a gesture Kathy recognized immediately from her own pregnancy decades ago. "You're pregnant," she stated, not a question. Vanessa nodded, tears welling in her eyes. 12 weeks. Brian doesn't know yet. I was waiting for the right time. But then all this happened, and now there's talk of criminal charges. She drew a shaky breath. I can't have my child's father in prison, but I also can't have my child raised by someone who would steal from his own mother. Kathy felt a surge of conflicting emotion sympathy for the unborn grandchild she might never know, wariness of another manipulation tactic, and a strange sense of vindication that even Vanessa now recognized the wrongness of Brian's actions. "What kind of evidence are you offering?" she asked carefully. "Emails, bank transfers, recordings of conversations where Brian discussed." Vanessa swallowed hard. "Discussed ways to have you declared incompetent. It was his idea, not mine. I went along with it, but I never wanted—" She trailed off, seeming to realize the weakness of her defense. "I'll need to discuss this with my lawyer," Kathy said. "Of course." Vanessa reached into her purse and withdrew a USB drive. This has copies of everything. Consider it a gesture of good faith. Kathy accepted the drive without touching Vanessa's fingers. This doesn't change what happened. I know. Vanessa's perfect composure cracked further, a tear sliding down her cheek. But maybe it can change what happens next. After Vanessa left, Kathy rejoined the support group, the USB drive heavy in her pocket. Dr. Morales gave her a questioning look, but didn't press for details in front of the others. The meeting continued, but Kathy found it hard to focus. Her mind kept returning to the image of Vanessa's hand protectively covering her abdomen, a grandchild Kathy might never know, another innocent caught in the tangled web of family dysfunction. Later, as the meeting dispersed, Dr. Morales pulled her aside. Are you all right? That looked intense. Kathy explained Vanessa's unexpected visit and offer. I don't know what to do, she admitted. Part of me wants justice, real consequences for what they did to me. But another part wants to protect your grandchild, Dr. Morales finished. That's natural, Kathy. But remember, justice and vengeance aren't the same thing. True justice can include a path to redemption. If they're genuinely seeking redemption, Kathy pointed out, Vanessa might just be saving herself. Perhaps, but her concern for her child seems genuine. Dr. Morales touched Kathy's shoulder lightly. Whatever you decide, make sure it serves your healing, not just your hurt. The USB drive contained exactly what Vanessa had promised, damning evidence of a coordinated plan to exploit Kathy financially and eventually have her declared incompetent. The recordings were particularly disturbing, capturing Brian's cold calculation as he discussed strategies with Vanessa and, occasionally, with a financial advisor who seemed uncomfortable but ultimately complicit. James was ecstatic. This is everything we need, he told Kathy, reviewing the files in his office. With this evidence, we could push for full restitution, legal costs, and even punitive damages. And criminal charges, Kathy asked. James nodded. Fraud, identity theft, elder financial abuse, the district attorney would have a solid case. What about Vanessa's request for immunity? That would be up to the DA, but given her cooperation and condition, it's plausible they'd offer a deal. James studied Kathy's face. You're not sure you want to pursue criminal charges, are you? I don't know, Kathy admitted. Part of me does, but prison won't get my money back, and there's the baby to consider now. It's your decision, James said gently. We can present the evidence to Brian's attorney first, use it as leverage for a comprehensive settlement. Criminal charges remain an option if he refuses to cooperate. After careful consideration, Kathy chose this middle path. James arranged a settlement conference with Brian's attorney, laying out the new evidence and terms, full restitution of all stolen funds, payment of Kathy's legal fees, a legally binding agreement to cease all contact unless explicitly invited, and documented psychological counseling for Brian. My client will need time to consider these terms, Brian's attorney said stiffly, clearly shaken by the recordings. 48 hours, James replied. After that, we take everything to the district attorney. 2 days later, Brian's attorney called to accept the terms. With one addition, Brian requested a face-to-face meeting with Kathy before signing the agreement. Absolutely not, was James's immediate response, but Kathy, after initial reluctance, decided to agree. I need closure, she explained to a concerned Sarah and Dr. Brian Morales over dinner that evening. And I need to see for myself if there's anything left worth salvaging. At least let me come with you, Sarah pleaded. James will be there, Kathy assured her. And we're meeting in his office, on my terms. Dr. Morales studied her thoughtfully. You've come a long way, Kathy. 6 months ago, you might have agreed to this meeting hoping for reconciliation, for some magic words that would make everything better. What are you hoping for now? Kathy considered the question. Honesty, I suppose. Just once. I want Brian to look me in the eye and acknowledge what he did without excuses or manipulation. And if he can't, then I'll know for certain it's time to move on. The meeting was set for the following afternoon in James's office, neutral territory, with the added security of his staff nearby. Kathy arrived early, choosing a seat that allowed her to see the door, unwilling to have Brian approach from behind. He arrived precisely on time, escorted by James's assistant. He looked thinner than Kathy remembered, with new lines etched around his eyes and mouth. He wore a suit that hung slightly loose on his frame, as if he'd lost weight recently. Mom, he said quietly, taking the seat across from her. James sat at the head of the conference table, a silent but watchful presence. Brian, Kathy kept her voice neutral. You wanted to talk. I'm listening. Brian glanced at James, then back to Kathy. Could we speak privately? No, Kathy said firmly. Whatever you have to say, you can say in front of my attorney. Brian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Fine. I wanted to tell you that I've accepted the settlement terms, all of them, including the counseling. Thank you for that, Kathy said. Is that all? No. Brian leaned forward, his expression earnest. I wanted to explain. If you're about to justify what you did, save your breath, Kathy interrupted. I've heard all the excuses. Not excuses, Brian insisted. Explanations. There's a difference. Is there, you stole from me, Brian? You forged my signature. You tried to have me declared incompetent. What possible explanation could justify that Brian's carefully constructed facade cracked slightly? I was desperate the business was failing. Investors were pulling out. Creditors were calling day and night. I just needed time to turn things around. So you decided to sacrifice me instead, Kathy said flatly. It wasn't like that. I always intended to pay you back, to take care of you. By putting me in a memory care facility against my will, Brian had the grace to look ashamed. That was wrong. I see that now. But you have to understand, I was drowning, and you always said family comes first. Family, yes, not exploitation. Kathy shook her head sadly. Do you know what hurts the most, Brian? Not the money, not even the lies. Is that you stopped seeing me as a person. I became a resource to you, a checkbook, a signature, an obstacle to work around. Not your mother, not even a human being with my own needs and rights. Brian's eyes filled with tears. That's not true. I love you. Perhaps you do, in your way, Kathy conceded. But love without respect is just another form of control. A heavy silence fell between them. Finally, Brian spoke again, his voice subdued. Vanessa's pregnant. I know. His head snapped up. She told you, yes. When? That's between Vanessa and me, Kathy said. She studied her son's face, the face she had once memorized as a newborn, had kissed better after childhood falls, had watched mature through adolescence into adulthood, familiar, yet now somehow foreign. What do you want from this conversation? Brian, forgiveness, reconciliation. Brian's shoulders slumped. I don't know. Maybe I just wanted to see you one last time. Before, he gestured vaguely, encompassing the legal documents on the table, the formal setting, the gulf between them. It doesn't have to be the last time, Kathy said quietly, but it would need to be different, very different. Hope flickered in Brian's eyes. What do you mean? The settlement terms include no contact unless I initiate it. I'm willing to consider limited contact in the future, under certain conditions. What conditions? First, you complete a full course of psychological counseling, and I mean really engage with it, not just check the box. Kathy ticked off points on her fingers. Second, you make full restitution as outlined in the settlement. Third, you maintain appropriate boundaries, no discussions of my finances, health decisions, or living arrangements unless I specifically ask for your input. Brian nodded slowly. And if I do all that, then we can explore rebuilding a relationship, a different kind of relationship, adult to adult, with mutual respect. Kathy leaned forward. But Brian, I need you to understand something fundamental. I will never again be your safety net. Never. That part of our relationship is over permanently. The words hung in the air between them, a line drawn that could never be uncrossed. Brian's face reflected a complex mix of emotions, grief, anger, perhaps even a glimmer of relief. I understand, he said finally. Do you really? Kathy pressed. Because this is your last chance. Break these boundaries again, and I will cut contact completely and permanently. Brian met her gaze directly. I understand, and I'll do the work. For what it's worth, I am sorry. Not just for getting caught, but for everything. It wasn't the full acknowledgement Kathy had hoped for, but it was something a small crack in the wall of justification and excuses, a tiny admission of genuine wrong. Thank you for that, she said softly. Now, I believe we have papers to sign. The formal signing process took less than 30 minutes. When it was complete, Brian stood awkwardly, as if unsure of the proper protocol for departing. Vanessa mentioned you're moving to the Cape, he said. Yes, my cottage needs some updating, but it will be ready by fall. It's a nice spot, Brian offered. I always loved it there as a kid. The memory of Brian as a sunburned child, building elaborate sandcastles at the water's edge, briefly overlaid Kathy's vision of the man before her. For a moment, the weight of what they'd lost, what they both lost, threatened to overwhelm her. Goodbye, Brian, she said. her voice steady despite the emotion tightening her throat. I wish you well with the baby. He or she deserves the best version of you. Brian nodded, swallowing hard. Goodbye, Mom. After he left, Kathy remained seated, a curious emptiness settling over her, not the hollow emptiness of loss, but the clean emptiness of a room cleared of clutter, ready for new purpose. Are you all right? James asked gently. Yes, Kathy said, surprising herself with the truth of it. I am. Cape Cod welcomed Kathy home with the timeless rhythm of waves against shore and the piercing cries of gulls overhead. The cottage, weathered gray shingles and salt-sprayed windows, sat on a small bluff overlooking the Atlantic, just as it had since her grandparents built it in 1948. The renovation had taken most of the summer, making the small home more accessible with a first-floor bedroom and bathroom, updated heating for year-round living, a modest deck for watching sunrises over the ocean. Kathy supervised every detail, learning more about construction and permits than she'd ever expected to know at 65. Now, on a crisp October morning, she stood on that deck, coffee mug warming her hands, watching golden light spill across the water. Behind her, the cottage door opened, and Sarah emerged, wrapped in a thick cardigan against the autumn chill. It's criminal to be awake this early, she grumbled good-naturedly, joining Kathy at the railing. Though, I'll admit, the view almost makes it worthwhile. Kathy smiled. You'll get used to beach time. Early mornings, early nights. Maybe? Sarah sipped from her own mug. Are you nervous about today? A little, Kathy admitted. They were expecting visitors, Brian, Vanessa, and 4-month-old Emma, Kathy's first grandchild. It would be the first time she'd seen any of them since the settlement signing in June. The invitation had been Kathy's idea, extended after months of reports from Dr. Morales, who was now supervising Brian's mandatory counseling, suggesting he was making genuine progress. Small steps acknowledging his patterns of exploitation, exploring their roots, learning healthier ways to manage his emotions and finances. You don't have to do this, Sarah reminded her. No one would blame you for maintaining distance. I know. Kathy watched a fishing boat on the horizon, a tiny white speck against the vast blue. But I'm not doing it for him, or even for the baby. I'm doing it for me. How so? Because I want to see if I can have a limited relationship with my son without falling back into old patterns. Because I want to know my granddaughter. And because I want to prove to myself that I can maintain boundaries even in difficult circumstances. Sarah nodded thoughtfully. Just remember you have backup. I'll be here all day, and Peggy's coming for dinner. If things get uncomfortable, we can run interference. My protective squad. Kathy smiled. Damn right. Sarah linked arms with her friend. Now come inside and help me with breakfast. If I'm going to face your son, I need protein. They were setting out muffins and fruit when a car pulled into the shell driveway. Kathy watched through the window as Brian helped Vanessa out of the passenger seat, then carefully unbuckled the infant carrier from the back. Here we go, she murmured. The visit wasn't perfect. There were awkward pauses, careful navigation around certain topics, moments when old patterns threatened to reassert themselves. But there were also new things: Brian accepting Kathy's firm no when he offered unsolicited financial advice, Vanessa showing genuine interest in the cottage renovation, both of them respecting the physical and emotional boundaries Kathy had established. And there was Emma Tiny, perfect Emma with Brian's eyes and Vanessa's delicate features, who gurgled happily in Kathy's arms and grabbed at her necklace with surprising strength. She likes you, Vanessa observed as Emma nestled against Kathy's shoulder. The feeling is mutual, Kathy replied softly. They stayed for 3 hours, long enough for a walk on the beach, lunch, and baby nap time. As they prepared to leave, Brian hesitated by the door. Thank you, he said quietly. For today. For. He gestured vaguely, seeming to encompass everything: the invitation, the chance, perhaps even the firm boundaries that were reshaping their relationship. You're welcome, Kathy replied simply. It was good to meet Emma. Maybe we could come again for Thanksgiving. Perhaps, Kathy considered this. Not Thanksgiving, she said gently but firmly. I have plans with friends, but another day in December, before the holidays. If that works for you? Brian accepted this without argument, a small victory, a sign of change. After they left, Kathy and Sarah sat on the deck watching the afternoon light play across the water. That went better than I expected, Sarah admitted. Me too, Kathy agreed. It's strange I spent so many years being whatever Brian needed me to be. His safety net, his emergency fund, his guaranteed support. I thought if I stopped being those things, there'd be nothing left between us. She smiled slightly. But maybe, just maybe, we're finding something new. Something healthier. For both of you, Sarah pointed out. Yes. They sat in companionable silence, listening to the waves. Tomorrow, Kathy would host her first Cape Cod meeting of financial literacy for seniors, a volunteer position she'd taken on after connecting with a local community center. Next week, she'd meet with her investment advisor to review her rebuilding retirement portfolio. The week after that, Dr. Morales was coming to visit, along with Peggy and Richard from the support group. Her life was full not with obligations or sacrifices, but with choices she'd made freely, connections she'd forged on her own terms. Far out on the horizon, the fishing boat was returning to harbor, its day's work complete. Kathy watched it growing larger against the vast ocean, finding its way home as the sun began its slow descent toward evening. She thought of the strings that had once bound her guilt, obligation, misplaced loyalty, and how cutting them had not left her adrift, as she'd feared, but had set her free to chart her own course. The boat disappeared around the headland, heading for safe harbor. Kathy leaned back in her chair, at peace with the woman she had become, no longer defined by what she gave or what was taken from her, but by the strength she'd found in setting herself free. They say the most dangerous weapon is a woman who has nothing left to lose. But perhaps the most powerful force is a woman who discovers what she has to gain herself. Catherine Reynolds once measured her worth by what she sacrificed: a house sold to fund a dream not her own, a retirement delayed for emergencies that never ended, a heart strained to breaking by the weight of expectations she could never satisfy. She had given away pieces of herself for so long, she'd forgotten how it felt to be whole. The journey back was neither straight nor simple. It cost her the comfortable illusions of family loyalty. It demanded she face betrayal without flinching, that she learn to distinguish love from exploitation, boundaries from walls. It required her to stand alone in courtrooms and hospital rooms, to rebuild her life one difficult decision at a time. But as she sits on her deck overlooking the Atlantic, watching sunlight dance across waves that have witnessed countless beginnings and endings, Catherine knows the truth sometimes. What we think breaks us actually sets us free. The strings that once bound her now lie scattered, powerless. And in their place, something stronger has emerged, a life reclaimed, on her terms, by her choice. What strings in your own life might be worth examining? What freedom waits on the other side of no?